Yet another censored doctor on the show. Dr. Leland Stillman is here to talk to us about getting ripped off of YouTube a couple years ago, only to have history prove him right. But before we get into what you were talking about there, Dr. Stillman, I want to go right to this because I know you're a huge fan of the mainstream news. I'd say that somewhat sarcastically.
Right.
This article just came out for Zero Hedge. CNN hosts, we should yield to government censorship demands. And they're discussing in this clip, which we can play for everybody. And I think just raise your hand with like a peace symbol or something if you want me to stop it, if there's some part you're really passionate about. Otherwise, I'll just stop it where I'm interested. But you get a very, I think, clear picture with their discussion about how they not only look at the role of government to protect us. There's zero questions about the government ever getting it wrong, the government being controlled by special interests, the government potentially blocking life-saving information. There's zero questions about that. And really, frankly, I think hysteria, I mean, the guy on the left, you'll see, he literally says, God help us if this ruling, and I should say it's a decision, okay? Instead somebody say, judges don't rule, that's what happens in monarchies. Okay, decision that this judge, the collusion lawsuit that Missouri and a couple other states, I have Dr. Cariati coming on next week.
Awesome.
So we should be able to talk about that in depth. But so the judge basically said, hey, you got to stop pressuring tech companies to censor. Now, there are a lot of questions that this is really going to do anything. We can go into that in a second. But let's just watch this, okay? We're ready to go. And let me know if you can't hear it. And let me know if you want me to stop it somewhere. Here we go.
Sure. Thank Respective News. Errol Lewis back with us on all of that. So Ellie just went through brilliantly the law here. What do you make of what this actually means in practice? If this were to become the final ruling and withstand challenges in the Fifth Circuit and up to the Supreme Court, then what? FBI, CDC, DHS, DOJ?
That would be startling, in part because these agencies all use social media. They don't just, sort of censor it and weigh in on it and ask a question here and there. They're propagating really important information about public health, about public transportation, about safety and security. For them to now suddenly have a hands-off attitude and let anything run rampant across all of these platforms would just be radical. It would be a very different kind of a country that we have.
Okay, I had to stop there because it's so radical that first off, I believe he's misleading people here because he's saying that all of a sudden, like, the FBI can't use their Twitter account. But that's not what this is not what the decision was about. The decision was about the government pressuring the tech companies to go basically and curate content, censoring people like you, for instance. Is that what you understand?
About the decision?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, that's a great question. I didn't read a lot about the decision. I mean, my main, curiosity with all this is the fact that these alphabet soup agencies want to police our thought. And I realize that these people, right, on CNN, their viewership, are shocked that freedom of speech is a thing in the United States. I mean, he basically starts by shifting the Overton window of American public discourse in the First Amendment all the way over to massive censorship, unmitigated censorship by the alphabet soup agencies, and saying that that's normal. And the First Amendment normalcy that many of us grew up with and are used to is actually radical, which is crazy. I mean, what America he grew up in, I've never been there. So,
well, you're right. He says it would be a totally different country, which, I agree with him. It would be a totally different country, and I would welcome it. Right. But yeah, you're right. He looks at you're totally right. He looks at like what's happening now is that's the United States. And like I said, the reason I wanted to play this is just to show, because I often say, having been in television news, I often say that it's not, people get it wrong when they think that you have these evil masterminds who know the truth, but just want to brainwash you otherwise. I do believe there are probably puppeteers like that at the top, but I think these people are like religious true believers. Like this is their religion.
These are definitely the true believers. These are the obedient idiots.
Yeah, the obedient. Yeah, okay, let's keep watching.
Right.
It's hard to imagine how they could do their work effectively. Perhaps they would have to go to some other new platform and create something new. So to take your hypothetical, if anybody can say whatever they want, propagate any kind of, conspiracy theory, false information, misinformation across these gigantic.
Okay, and this is where I love when they say that, like, that's only done by Joe Smith on the internet. That's never done by the government. The government itself.
The misinformation that came out of these alphabet soup agencies was insane. I mean, remember that time when they said, stop taking ivermectin, it's for horses? It was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1984, before I was born, for treating river blindness in humans. It's one of the most remarkably
Don't say
effective...
anything positive about it with COVID before we get off YouTube.
Don't worry, we won't. But I mean, ivermectin is used for deworming in people and horses. It's not misinformation to say that it's for people. It's just a question of, what off-label use you're going to use it for. And I can tell you, and we'll get into more of this off the traditional, conventional social media platforms. I mean, there's so many things you can use it for that it's effective for. And it's totally normal for doctors to use things off-label, especially in difficult cases or extreme situations. Like I just had a case of a woman who I'm going to use an immunological or immunomodulating drug to try and treat an autoimmune condition that is the result of something that I won't mention here, and you can all use your imaginations to figure out what that is, that hasn't responded to a lot of other things that I've done. And that's very normal for doctors to do. And they're totally gaslighting people into thinking that that's weird.
Right. Yeah. The ivermectin horse medicine thing was such a beautiful example of orchestrated propaganda by the government that the media just ran with. I tell people all the time, I was one of these people. This is, I think, why it makes it so fascinating to me, because I don't know why, I still to this day do not know why I thought the government was the trustworthy source. Like, if they sent us a press release, we didn't go look for a secondary or a tertiary source to fact check them. We just read the press release. But if you came to us and said, hey, the government's lying here, the government's telling us this, but this is not, we'd go, oh, hang on a second, Dr. Stillman. I mean, it's not to say that we wouldn't cover it, but we would have to find lots of other stuff to investigate what you were saying in order to feel comfortable going with it. Why? I do not know. I mean, I was one of those people that showed up to work like really trying to do a good job. And I believed this for a long time. I genuinely do not know why. And that's why I'm interested in this, because I believe they do too. They really believe the government is giving you the objective information and everybody else outside of it is biased. And I think it's because it confirms their own bias. Like if it went again, like I really believe this was the Trump administration right now, this would be a different conversation. I don't think they would have a presidential administration doing this stuff if it was removing stuff from the internet that they liked. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think they would have a different view.
No, I mean, I think that when you compare the way that the left treats the right with censorship and misinformation claims and the way the right treat the left with censorship and misinformation claims, it could be more different. One of these people showed up, to basically a fist fight with a knife, and the other group, the conservatives, are still playing in some respects with kid gloves with the left for censorship and misinformation.
Yeah, that's not a bad analogy. Okay, let me find my, here we go. Let's play it again.
Platforms, the government would have to do something just to be able to tell us about, the weather or what.
And this is not true, but she's going to call him out on it in a second. Yeah. Like this is why I realize people who watch CNN, now I get it. Like, if this is all they're consuming, they're like totally freaked out that the FBI is not going to be able to tell you about the weather anymore. That's so ridiculous.
But also, why do we need the government to tell us all this stuff? I mean, the purpose of the government is not to inform the public. It is to serve the public. So any organ of the state that's supposed to be informing the people becomes an organ of the state that whoever has skin in that game has a massive incentive to control. So that's why the whole idea of the FDA, the CDC, all these health agencies, anyone with any sense at all who understands how capitalism works and how free markets work, you look at these and you realize the minute you give them control over the market, the people who they're able to either empower or disempower will perceive that it's time to start buying politicians so that they can control the alphabet soup agencies. And that's exactly what's happened. So there's no people who are skeptical of the mainstream narrative at these agencies. They're just these self-reinforcing groupthink, just cesspools of wokeness where people have no real grasp of reality. And that's what, I mean, just boggles my mind. People are living in this totally alternate reality. And I shouldn't call it an alternate reality, but they're living in a world where these people just say, well, you just need more drugs and you just need to go to the doctor and you just need to continue doing what we tell you. And it's not working out for them at all. And when you step out of that paradigm and you actually start to focus on people's wellness, they get better. And then the whole narrative just completely crumbles. And that's why the first thing they want to censor is our ability to say this is good for you, this is bad for you, this is dangerous, this is safe.
My husband just reminded me, remember Operation Warp Speed and how freaked out they were about the vaccine when it was under Trump's, and then it was like you should drink a million doses of it when it was under Biden. It was just such an interesting.
Bizarre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
I'm a total critic of Operation Warp Speed, but not because of the reasons that they were, So anyway,
Right.
But yeah, it just goes to show, like, if it's their person, all right, let's keep going.
Or not roads are blocked, that sort of a thing.
Yeah, like they can't tell you if roads are blocked. That's not what. But see, this is how they get people freaked out. Oh my gosh, WashDOT in Washington State, they're not going to be able to tell me that the roads are blocked, and I'm going to get into car accidents. This is crazy. Like, this is not true. But anyway, she's going to correct
me
God.
if I'm wrong, Ellie and Errol. But this judge isn't saying those social media companies can't use their own content moderation tools. They're saying the government can't work with them in cahoots or what have you to tell them what to monitor.
Right. Well, and then that is really the heart of the issue.
He's like,
here.
yeah, you're right.
That's
Okay, I'm not going to admit that I was just basically gaslighting everybody, but anyway.
Necessarily addressed by this case in particular, but the social media companies have been irresponsible or asleep at the switch, however you want to put it, when it comes to this. And it has only been when either a popular swell of opinion or
that's true.
Or
they're totally
all
of these platforms
here we go.
would just be radical. It would be a very different kind of a country.
With them. And
okay, yeah, she's basically saying, yeah, that's true, that they've just been asleep at the wheel. They've been letting all kinds of misinformation. Here we go.
Popular swell of opinion or the government has said, you're doing something wrong. You are contributing to a problem, whether it's suicides among teenage girls who go searching on social media and suddenly the algorithm starts putting nooses in front of them and articles about how to kill yourself. And it has to be brought to the attention of social media. There was the case I'd mentioned before about a 12-year-old girl commits suicide, live streams it, and the video stays on Facebook for 2 weeks before they take it down. If the government is powerless to say anything about that, to even inquire and say, gee, could you do something about this? Could you fix this? How often does this happen? If they're not in a position to do that, God help us all. I don't know where or how irresponsible they would be.
God help us all. I mean, but see, this is like the greatest opportunity to say, okay, but let's play devil's advocate here. What happens if the government comes in and removes content that is life-saving? The opposite of what he just described.
Right. And
which
it completely
tons
misses
of times.
the boat on the fact that for a long, long time, we've been able to police our speech so that we didn't, and not in a authoritarian way with the government, but people would just say, they would essentially do things like they go to Facebook, they see offensive content, they go somewhere else, right? But that's where there's this idea that, and I'd be very fascinated to see. Oh, we lost Alison.
I'm here. No, I'm here. I'm just making you big so people can see you.
Oh, you're funny. Okay, got it. No, what I was going to say is, the fact of the matter is that prior to this, even this idea that censorship of any kind was appropriate, right? People would say to their service providers, businesses, hey, we don't like this, that, or the other thing. Please remove this, that, or the other thing from your whatever. And we would appreciate that, right? And that's how you retain and maintain customers, right? So like at my practice, we have, like I have I have a Bible quote in my profiles on social media. I'll sometimes talk about religion in my calls with people and talk to them about it because I think it's an important part of their wellness, right? And if that totally turns somebody off and they're not going to be my patient, they just take their business down the street, and that's fine, right? But that's about what I want to do in my practice with how I relate to people. And we have to allow people to have that freedom because that's how they figure out what really works. Otherwise, you just are spending a lot of your time trying to avoid what the fact checkers want you to say or not say, and you have to mince a lot of your words, which is very, very, it's just boring.
Yeah, well, that's one word for it. Okay, before we get to the coup d'etat in the video, where the other host says he understands it makes sense what happened during COVID with this public health emergency, that they felt like the government needed to come in and curate content, and like it just made sense to them, which it just boggles my mind because it just goes to show. I would hope that if they were exposed to people like you, but then again, I have to say they're choosing not to be, because you could have found it if you'd wanted to. If they were exposed to the doctors that I talked to throughout the pandemic, they would have had a very, at least I hope, at least a very different level of skepticism about what the government does to help people or hurt people based
Sure.
on basically who is scratching their back. I remember at the very beginning, I had Dr. David Brownstein, holistic doctor
Oh yeah, I
in
know David.
Michigan. He's awesome.
He's
And
great.
he was my first doctor who had a run-in basically with the government during COVID. This is back when I used to think I could say
Yes.
whatever I wanted on YouTube, and I was
And
just
he and I talked about that.
his
When I
FTC
first met
issue.
him back in 2021, I was working with Project Veritas, helping them cover the nonsense that got rolled out that poisoned a lot of people. And I talked to him because he and I were both named in a lawsuit by the FTC saying
Oh.
you have to take down information about certain things from your websites
Mhm.
that are basically dangerous to the public. And he told me that he took it to a constitutional lawyer who said, look, it'll be like 20 million for
Yep.
you to like
So write a book.
container, and we'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's going to take years to adjudicate. And he said, look, I'm a doctor, not a millionaire. I
Yeah.
can't finance a case like that. So, he and I and a lot of other people, we took that content down, even though we saw life-changing results
Mhm.
for people who came to us for those treatments.
Mhm.
And he and I actually recently just did an interview on iodine, and we talked a little bit about this in the interview and how important
Nice.
iodine is. That's over on my Substack. So yeah, David's been a real champion in this.
Yes. I wanted to do something on iodine. Maybe I'll have to have you guys back. We could do both of you guys at the same. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I always tell my viewers, if you want to be an extremist, but you don't want to go to federal prison, this is a great way to support my work and have a great glass of wine at the same time. These are extremist altitude wines. They come from, I used to call them extreme altitude, but I'm like, they're really extremist altitude because you support my content. If you're not being called an extremist yet, basically you're living in your grandma's basement, you're doing nothing and contribute to the world. Everybody who's anybody is being labeled an extremist. So get on board and get some extremist altitude Malbecs from Argentina. The one in the middle comes from almost 9,000 feet. The one on the left and the right come from about 6,000 feet. These wines include ones that are hand-harvested grapes, family productions, one in the middle, 200-year-old vineyard, oldest vineyard in Argentina, no filtration, natural fermentation, great wines that I drink myself. And I should add that the reason that Bonner Wine, AlisonWinePromo.com is a sponsor, and before I forget, 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping if you go over there now. The reason they're sponsors is because I was on Viva and Barnes. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Two attorneys. Okay.
No.
Well, one of them is a constitutional lawyer, Robert Barnes. Anyway, he asked me what my favorite drink is. And I said, high altitude wines from Argentina, because I had a buddy in Seattle who's a naturopathic doctor, and he's all about wine. I don't know if that you are. I don't know, you probably think alcohol's toxin or whatever. But anyway.
No, I love wine.
Oh, you do? Okay. I
Love
never
it.
know. But he was like, if you're going to drink wine, like this is where you should get them, because it's like way fewer pesticides. The grapes work really hard because they're trying to survive at these high altitude remote regions. If you want to call something healthy, anyway, I don't know if that's true, but I started getting into them and I just love the flavor. So I was talking about that on their show. Bonner Wine saw me talking about it, and they were like, would you like to become a sponsor? Because I just generally love these wines. So anyway, that's my pitch for that. If you're a coffee drinker, I'm drinking it right now. twinenginecoffee.com/Alison, USDA certified organic roast. I have my raw milk latte in the morning. I'm trying to find the banner for it so I can show you where you can go to buy it. Yes, twinenginecoffee.com/Alison. I got my espresso roast right now with my local raw milk. And if I had not run out of vanilla extracts and almond extracts, I would have put that in too, with a little bit of raw cocoa powder.
Nice.
It's my chocolate amaretto. Yeah, espresso. That's what I drink every morning. Love it. Okay, everybody. Thanks for supporting our work. And actually, as long as we're on this, Dr. Stillman, why don't you tell people where they can find you? And you offer some services too.
Yes. So I'm a natural, holistic, integrative wellness doctor. I operate in Florida and New York. That's where I'm licensed currently. And I not only take care of people as their medical doctor, but I also do a lot of group coaching with people. The medical practice website is stillmanmd.com. And the coaching website, where we also have online courses that we combine with the coaching, is stillmanwellness.com. And you can find me at Substack, which is stillmanmd.substack.com. We have great plans for pretty much every price point and budget. We take care of mostly, families, 30s to 50s, parents, but I mean, we have people all over the map in the practice, but that's really what we focus on.
Okay. And you are offering a promo code for the viewers today. Discount.
Yes, the promo code for our coaching programs is Alison, ALISON. We have a coaching program called the Fundamentals of Wellness, which I launched with my friend Jim Laird, who's a strength and conditioning coach. And what people need to know about this course is basically we put together all the different secrets and mistakes that we saw people making over the years that made them sick and stupid and more controllable, which I'm sure your audience wants to avoid becoming and being. And we packaged it all in one single online course and combined it with monthly group coaching. So you sign up for the course, you get the coaching, and we will basically teach you how to be as resilient as possible in the face of all the insanity that is going on around you. We see a lot of really life-changing results with this course. So I encourage people to check it out and sign up. And they can go to, can I drop it in the chat? I don't know if I can drop it in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a disclaimer, I'm not making any money off of this. He was just nice enough to offer a discount code. If you're interested, you could go to lelandstillmanmd.com and use Alison with one L.
Right, very important.
Okay, yes, if you share it. Okay.
We also do a lot of webinars. If people want to find out about the webinars I do on minerals and nutrition and anti-aging, longevity, hormones, make sure you're on my newsletter. You'll get notifications about those.
Okay. I will, let me see if I can, because I have to, should I put that link in the description? I guess I could do that.
Sure. Or you can just put it in the comments.
In the comments. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. Because you know how StreamYard is. It's, I have to replug in the audio for the CNN thing after I show. Okay, here, I'll show the website. Here you go. This is where you would go. Hang on, everybody. Okay. The fundamentals of wellness.
That's right.
Right? Okay.
A lot of stuff we've been consistently censored for.
Okay, yeah, and we got to talk about the video that was ripped off YouTube. Stillmanwellness.com. Okay, great. All right. Well, let's go back to CNN, except I have to re-plug in this audio. You know what? While I'm doing that, before we go back again, we're going to talk about the other anchor, talking about how it makes sense for the government to be pressuring the tech companies.
Yeah.
Without going into extreme detail, because I know some of the stuff could get us booted off YouTube.
Sure.
But we are going to continue this on the other platforms, not to evade censorship, just because we like it better over there. The lighting's better, the graphics are better. It's nothing to do with trying to evade censorship on YouTube. Could you tell people what happened to you a couple years ago with your video that went semi-viral and got yanked down?
Sure. So I spent the first part of 2020 and then the summer of 2020 working in a small rural country hospital in Minnesota. And I saw no cases of the disease that shall not be named pretty much all summer. I mean, case after case after case of other things rolled into the ER, and I took care of them. And I didn't see anything that I was supposed to be afraid of. And then when it did show up in 3 people, they didn't really look like they had any kind of typical syndrome that it was being described as this disease. And I just thought, these are sick old people. And I had been told to prepare for Armageddon. We were getting out old ventilators and protective equipment, and we were learning how to do things like intubate and run ventilators, which I hadn't done in years. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And then I was living in Virginia at the time and commuting back and forth to Minnesota. And I spoke out at a rally for medical freedom when the public health administrator or whatever, he's the chief public health official for the state of Virginia, came out and said that they would mandate the thing for everyone in Virginia once they had it. And I said, this is insane. You're talking about mandating a privately produced product to everyone that doesn't exist yet and has a safety profile that we therefore can't vet. And that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it would be one thing if you were mandating, something that was non-invasive, something that was like, for example, in the 1800s, they banned spitting in public to combat the spread of tuberculosis. And I mean, you might be a very, very ardent libertarian, but really, how much skin is it taking off your teeth to not spit in public? And so public health interventions like that are very benign. They're low risk. They don't destroy people's businesses, livelihoods, let alone their lives. And so, I've never had a problem with those simple things. But this was crazy. And I saw that right out of the gate. And I said he should resign. And then I had an impromptu interview at that at that event with somebody from LifeSite News. And in that, I basically laid out what I thought was really going on. it went extremely viral. And that whole channel, for telling the truth about what was really going on, they got taken down off of YouTube. I think they got pulled off of Facebook. They're now over on Rumble. Go give LifeSite News some love because they really deserve it. They were very courageous through the whole debacle of the last 3 years, and they never backed down once, and they always stuck to their guns. And you can see that video now over on BitChute is where I usually link to it.
Okay. Here we go. Let's finish up this one.
Well, that their algorithms promote rage, anger, division, whatever's going to get clicks, so that they can.
I love how they don't think they promote anger, rage, hate, division, anything.
I know. It's insane. These people are nuts. They're totally unhinged from reality.
It's like dissociative disorder at its best.
Sell advertising around it. It's a very profitable business model. If the government is powerless to put any guardrails around that, they're going to do more of what we've seen that has been so harmful, so damaging, and that led to a lot of the government inquiries in the first place.
One of the interesting
Pure,
aspects of this
straight
case
up
is the social
lies
media
and
companies
propaganda. That's what that is.
Yeah. But they really believe it. It's just crazy.
are not parties to this lawsuit. This is the states against the administration. And I wonder if in their heart of hearts, the social media companies want this or don't want this. On the one hand,
No, they haven't replied to questions yet. It's interesting.
Right. I mean, I would ask anyone if I had a chance to interview, representative of one of these companies.
It's nice to have the cover of like, well, the federal government asked us to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Exactly. It gives them an out on the one hand to say we're responding to the federal government. On the other hand, they might prefer to be completely unregulated and just do what they please. So it's interesting to see where they stand.
Can I just say one example, having
This is where it gets good.
covered the elements of this, we did not expect this to come. I think a lot of administration officials were surprised by the scale of the injunction.
What he means is we're very disappointed that this happened.
But an example that I think was cited in the lawsuit, which I think gets it, but kind of how this has landed up to this point is the Biden administration would regularly reach out to Twitter and Facebook and other companies in kind of the early stages of their COVID response and say, this person is spreading lies about vaccines. This account is.
But see, they never call him on the fact, like, was the government right about that? Or was this person saying the truth about the vaccines?
Right.
That's where they never push back on this. Is that it's just like the government was just telling the truth and they just wanted to make sure people, did the right thing with medical treatments or vaccines.
Spreading misinformation that is inhibiting not just our efforts, the administration's efforts to address COVID, but also public health. Do something about it. And often, I think more often than not, the companies would respond and say, okay. And there are emails that came out during the course of this case that was something that I think when it was explained to me at the time, I thought, all right, that makes sense. Like that's probably what we should do on public health grounds.
This would, if this passes muster through the courts, this would ban that.
And that's, as of now, they can't do that anymore because of the injunction. Is that correct?
Yeah, but again, there's that gray area. The administration might say, but this is a public health, national health issue, so we're allowed.
There's those exceptions.
There's so much that the judge leaves unclear.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so yeah, the final two things I think to take note here is that the question number one, is this really the groundbreaking decision that people think it is if, there are caveats for, again, an emergency that requires this kind of collusion. And then number two, I just want to go back to that guy who was like, yeah, when it explained to me, makes sense. Now, maybe what he was saying, because he was kind of saying it in past tense, is it possible that he's changed his mind on it? He didn't clarify. He didn't say, now I realize that, maybe it wasn't the best thing. But yeah, he's like, yeah, it makes sense to me that the government would go in and curate content for the sake of public health. Once again, the thing that never gets asked in these conversations is how many times did the government do that, get it wrong, and people died? And I know that happened many, many times because I talk to people like you. But I just wonder, like, you have to, I really think you have to work hard to maintain ignorance like this. I don't know. Like I said, I was there. So I'm trying to say, like, I'm better. I was totally there. But at the same time, it just is bewildering to me that doesn't even come up in the conversation, not even one time.
But I think the important thing for people to understand about this, because I think a lot of people have been blindsided by the way that things have gone the last few years. They're amazed that their neighbors, their friends, their family members have basically turned on them and pretty much betrayed, I'll just say it, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and are practically speaking voting for people who want to put them in some combination of jail, poverty. I mean, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's serious risk to people on the conservative side of things of losing their livelihood, losing their job. You know, many of us, like you and I, we stepped out of a very comfortable mainstream job, right, in order to do our own thing, because we knew that if we were honest with people, you know, on air, or for me in, say, the exam room in my work, I would get fired, right? And so they're completely ignoring that, and they don't seem to care at all about how their how all of this affects those people. And it's just really it's awful. It's awful. And I agree with you that they were having to work hard in order to stay ignorant. But the fact of human nature is that this isn't new. People have a really difficult time coming to grips with the fact that the people in charge don't actually have their best interests at heart. The people who understand that the people in charge are just as flawed and human as they are in relative terms a minority of humanity. And of that minority, those who have the will to oppose those people is much, much smaller. You know, 5-10% of the populace, maybe. I mean, you know, most of the people in the medical world who really stood up and opposed this and spoke out and took media interviews and were willing to get in front of the camera and criticize the narrative and present information contrary to it, it's a very small group of us, maybe as few as a few dozen. And that's unfortunately where we're at as a country because of how tight the corporate control of medicine is. Many more people would have spoken out and been honest if we had a more independent medical community, but they've all been subsumed by the big corporate healthcare players who have essentially destroyed free thought in medicine. And then they completely, they basically, by getting the physicians into their little clubs, they're then able to corral them and keep them from running off the reservation and finding out any shred of truth about how to actually get patients well and keep them well. So.
All right. I think this is the point where we're going to cut the YouTube stream. If you want to join my editorial board, go to alisonmorrow.locals.com. You can put in questions ahead of time for interviews. People like Dr. Stillman, go one-on-one with most censored people on the internet. It's a great way to support my work as well and be part of my community. Get lots of extra content. You get one media show exclusive for supporters a week called Tittle Tattle I do with Bill Doris, who was also in TV news. We have a lot of fun over there, so consider joining. And we are going to, since you brought up medical journals, that's actually how I put this out, your video and everything, to show my supporters so they can put in their questions. You were talking about medical journals are for sale. So yes. I want to talk to you about that and get some questions from viewers before you go. Thanks for everybody who's watching on YouTube. We will see you over on Rumble, Rockfin, or Locals. Okay. I think we're good. Okay. Let's
I think I'm still live on
you think
Facebook.
You're live on YouTube and Facebook?
Yeah. Let me
okay, if you want to take the chance, you can.
No, I don't want to take the chance.
I just don't. I don't.
Yeah, we're just gonna remove that.
Hanging by a string. And some people might say you're a weakling. Listen, I went after